Truly, thank you so much again for having me. It's an honor to be here. And so as far as my introduction goes, thank you, Anne. You totally nailed it. I am really proud to be from Arizona. I'm a third generation Arizonan. My family is all from Bisbee. What was in Bisbee for mining before the mines closed, and then slowly all transitioned to Tucson. So I technically really kind of grew up in Tucson, even though my family is all from Bisbee and I was born in Bisbee. But Tucson is really where I call home. My mom still lives there. My whole family still lives there. And I'm just really, really proud to be from Arizona. I'm proud to be from such an incredible culture and such an incredible state where so unique in comparison to all other states, right? We, unlike the East Coast, we have the ability to really collaborate and really work together to make the state what we want it to be. And I think on the East Coast, you tend to have a little bit more of the, you have to be from a specific family or from a specific group of people, whereas here we get to do this all together. And I think that spirit is really what informs a lot of my work. And I think it's really what informs our office's work as well. It's just that spirit of collaboration and that spirit of wanting to get things done for the betterment of Arizona. So truly, again, thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be able to provide you some information about our office and kind of the work that we've been doing in relation to infrastructure and the federal money that's available. I normally, when I'm doing presentations in person, I like to be able to do questions kind of throughout the presentation. I tend to be a bit more relaxed and a little bit more informal when it comes to presentations. I think they're more fun that way. On Zoom, I think it is a little bit more difficult to do it that way. So please do have questions. If you do have questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll make sure to address them at the end, or please feel free to ask them at the end of the presentation. I tend to have a pretty short presentation today to have as much time for questions at the end. So yeah, please definitely feel free to ask any question. I'm happy to be able to answer them. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to give an introduction to our office and who we are. So as Anne mentioned, during the governor's state of the state, the governor relaunched and initiated the Office of Resiliency. So the Office of Resiliency was really created to unite water, land use, and energy policy under one umbrella, with really the underlying purpose of that to provide leadership that addresses the compounding threats of Arizona's water, natural resources, and impacts of the climate crisis. And so through our office, Governor Hobbs seeks to really bring state agencies, businesses, and the underserved communities together, specifically also with tribal communities, so we can identify climate solutions that expand jobs and economic opportunities, while also improving the health and well-being of Arizonans, and really for that ultimate goal of paving long-term prosperity for all Arizonans. In Governor Hobbs's main priorities, one of her primary priorities is building Arizona for everyone. And that's really what we're doing here in our office, is building a resilient Arizona for everyone. You might all know our director, Marin Mahoney. So Director Mahoney comes from a very, very long history of being involved in this space. She is a lawyer by training and also worked at the Arizona Corporation Commission with Commissioner Kennedy. Really fantastic person who brings such a wealth of knowledge to our office. And I'm truly so thankful for her and so thankful to be under her leadership. She provides such great expertise in this world, and we're very, very thankful to have her. Will Green, who's our land use policy advisor, he also comes from a really well established background who you might all know as well. He comes from the Corporation Commission most immediately. He had worked with Commissioner Kennedy as well after Director Mahoney. But prior to that, he also worked in real estate. And so he has training and a degree in real estate development. So he really understands kind of the intricacies of land use. And on top of that, he actually worked directly with solar development companies. And so he has a really strong history in renewable generation, renewable development, and is able to really see kind of that bigger picture about how we can use our land, which is something that very unique to Arizona, is such a strong resource here, in order to generate more renewable energy, and really sees that intersection, that nexus between energy, land use, and water. Patrick Adams, who you might also know, he comes from AMWA. He does our water policy advising and is truly a brilliant mind. If you haven't been able to meet him yet, I highly encourage you all to engage with him. He really brings a wealth of knowledge with a really strong background in water and the complexities of water. I come from an energy background, so I very much know energy. And so when we talk about water, it gets so complex. I'm like, okay, Patrick, I need you to draw me like a picture. Like, here's a water droplet, it goes into business, and water droplet out. Like, where are we talking here? He is just really able to take that kind of really complex nature of water and the complex system of water and make it very relatable, not only for me, but then also for the governor and for Arizona writ large. You probably have seen a lot about water in the news recently. And I will answer, if you have any questions about that, I will answer as much as I can. Admittedly, I will tell you at the beginning here that if there are some more in-depth questions on water, I probably will defer you directly to Patrick, and I can connect you all there with him because he is truly the expert on water. If we go to the next slide. So the governor really, for all state agencies and our administration's approach to working with state agencies is that we want to really empower state agencies to implement their mission statements, really based on that fullest extent of statutory authority. And from the governor's Office of Resiliency's perspective, our opportunity then becomes to empower state agencies to implement their mission as it relates also to resiliency and as it relates also to that nexus between energy, water, and land use. We oftentimes see that, and it's something that we've really come to acknowledge and something that we've come to understand a bit more deeply, that state agencies have kind of operated very much in silos for some time. And instead of connecting on water issues, they might be doing a lot of different water programming, which has been great, and they've been able to do a ton of work. But our office is able to then pull people together, pull these different state agencies together, pull ADWR, water resources, and environmental quality, for example, pull them together to say, okay, how can we work on water quality and water security together with the resources and expertise that you both bring to the table? So really, that's the governor's priorities for our office, specifically in working with state agencies, is encouraging and facilitating state agency cross-coordination and collaboration. We have a very strong focus on making sure that we are meeting the demands and the needs of Arizonans in meeting the climate crisis and solving climate crisis. And the best way for us to do that, in our opinion, is to make sure that there is that cross-coordination happening and collaboration happening across state agencies. We also obviously want to make sure that each state agency is working in alignment with Governor Hobbs' policy team. So as you probably might know as well, the governor has established a very wide policy team because she really wanted to make sure that she was bringing good experts onto her team who could advise on very specific policy areas. The previous administration had really fantastic individuals who were doing a ton of work when it comes to different policy areas, but they were tasked with doing a lot. So for example, our predecessor from the Office of Resiliency's perspective, there was one person who was managing energy, natural resources, water, land use. There's a ton that they were trying to do, and they were doing the best that they could, and we appreciate the work that they were able to get done. But the governor really wanted to make sure that she was expanding out the breadth of knowledge there. And so our policy team is pretty wide. We do have about 12 policy advisors covering many, many areas. And so each department really does have their own policy advisor generally. And so I most directly work with, from the energy perspective, RUCO, the Department of Environmental Quality, so ADEQ, when it comes to air quality perspective and air quality work. And then to some extent, and obviously you all know the complexities of the energy system in Arizona, but to some extent, I also work with the Corporation Commission as much as possible. Within Patrick, he is very much zoned in on water resources. So ADWR, he has weekly meetings with the director. There's so much going on with ADWR, and they've been doing such tremendous work. So he's very much focused on working with that department, as well as ADEQ when it comes to water quality issues. And then Will covers a ton of departments, including state lands, obviously, state parks. He also works with, to some extent, tourism when it comes to state parks specifically. He does a ton of work with a lot of different departments because he just really brings such a strong expertise into this world. So all of that to be said, our team and our policy advisors are there to really make sure that all of our agencies have a direct contact with the governor's office and that they are working to advance the governor's priorities and building an Arizona for everyone. Next slide. So obviously, when people think of the state government and the work of the governor, we want to make sure that we're highlighting some of those budget wins that we did have in the most recently passed budget. This is not an extensive list in any way. These are just very much some kind of high level resiliency focused wins that we wanted to highlight. But again, there's a much longer list of some wins that we had. But some things that I wanted to highlight for you all as far as when it comes to resiliency. So the electric vehicle charging and advanced fuel infrastructure for state facilities, that we were able to prioritize in our executive budget and actually was passed in the budget that was passed by the legislature and then signed by the governor. We were able to have $7.5 million for EV charging facilities and for fleet transformation. We actually did procure an additional $5 million on top of that as well for additional fleet transformation. So that total really does become $12.5 million, which is really exciting and a really great opportunity for us to be able to expand our charging infrastructure, not only at the state facilities, but then also looking at state parks. And then additionally, trying to really focus on transforming our energy system and transforming our fleet specifically. ADOT's doing a ton of work with NEVI funds, and we're able to supplement those funds with state budget funds. You might have heard about ADOT's report that's forthcoming and now being luckily funded through this budget, $3.5 million to really look at the restoration of interstate passenger rail service from Tucson to Phoenix, Phoenix being one of the largest cities. I believe it's actually the largest city in the country without direct rail service. And so really trying to make sure that we're focusing on that as well. There was a ton of money also available for emergency management and for DEMA work specifically. So the STORM Act federal matching funds we were able to procure, those are 9-to-1 federal matching funds. So generally, whereas it's been difficult in the past to procure state funding for this type of work, we were able to do it in this budget, specifically looking at how we can match those federal funds. We also were able to secure an economic transition fund for $9 million. That $9 million is being technically housed in the ACA, the Commerce Authority. And the goal of that $9 million is to help coal transition communities to build workforce development, do infrastructure projects, things of that nature in communities that are near recently closed coal mines. So that's really looking at Navajo Nation specifically. Our office just met actually yesterday with ACA to talk about this project. And we're really, really excited about the prospects with that $9 million. And then the second kind of column, if you will, is really, except for the last one, is focused on water funding. As you know, the governor is very passionate about making sure that we are protecting our water and that we are making sure that Arizonans know our water is secure and available. And so we have dedicated a lot of money to making sure that water quality is very much of high priority and that it's very much readily available. And then that last one, it's a kind of small amount of money, but we're really excited about it. So we were able to secure $300,000 for trees in schools and to improve shade in schools for children who come from potentially low-income communities specifically, and making sure that the schools are as shaded as possible and that our schools are able to teach about just kind of that tree cycle and the importance of trees when it comes to long-term sustainability. Next slide. So I kind of wanted to break this down into two sections. So you have the state side where we have our state priorities as well as state funding. But then we also have the priorities for state agencies in relation to federal funding. And that's really where I think this group will be most connected, right? So one of the governor's priorities is making sure that state agencies, and specifically our office, is applying for and pulling down as much federal funding as possible from the infrastructure law, which many people call either bill or IJA, and then the Inflation Reduction Act or the IRA. We are truly at a moment that is once in a lifetime opportunity to pull down a ton of money from the federal government to do some really fantastic and transformative work in Arizona. And our office is making sure and really leading the way in state government on procuring a lot of that money. So if we can go to the next slide, and underlying all of that, underlying all of our work in pulling down those federal monies, which we'll be talking about in just a moment, is making sure that we're focusing on equity. The governor is very passionate about and really wants to prioritize and center the voices of our tribal communities and communities that have been historically underserved or historically disenfranchised. And so we're really following and abiding by the federal government's Justice 40 initiative, which does aim to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of relevant federal investments to disadvantaged communities. We're actively engaging with community-based organizations, with tribal communities, with tribal nations, and really trying to make sure that all of these benefits have at their very core that they're centering our communities that have been historically underserved. So if we go to the next slide, we can start talking about some of the grant opportunities that we've already applied for from our office. So you might know a lot of these. I'll go over them kind of briefly, and then I can go into more detail with questions if you all have them about these specific opportunities. But so far, our office, just in the past couple of months, so we all actually just started at the very beginning of March, technically. So I started February 27th. So in the past couple of months, we've applied for over $51.6 million in federal funding already, with another anticipated just over $150 million to be applied for by the end of the year. So a lot of money to really make transformative work happen here in the state. The first application that I want to talk about, first grant opportunity I want to talk about, is the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG. CPRG is funded through the EPA. We've applied for that grant opportunity and we're planning on receiving that $3 million for planning purposes. So that's a $3 million over a 3-year cycle to plan out climate action work for the entire state. We are partnering with MAG as well as Pima County on this because MAG and Pima County were allocated $1 million each as well to do similar planning work. And so we're coordinating with them. And I'm still working to schedule monthly meetings with MAG and Pima County to make sure that from the planning perspective that we're working together and really viewing it more as a $5 million plot instead of just a 3-1-in-1. It's because we're going to be able to do so much more work that way. The overarching goal and underlying principle for that $3 million in that planning process is to make sure that we have access to $4.7 billion of implementation funding. So to access that $4.7 billion, we have to have a comprehensive plan set up and submitted to EPA and the federal government with very specific plans. Only the projects that are listed in the plans will be able to be eligible for that $4.7 billion. So we're definitely really trying to hit the ground running on this one. We are awaiting for our final letter of award from EPA. We've had many conversations with EPA, and they've been really, really great to work with and very supportive of our application. We should be hearing, they were hoping to have it by the end of May. Hopefully we should have it in the next couple of weeks, and we can get a contractor on board so that we can go through the hiring process of bringing on some additional staff to support it, as well as a contractor, and then start that planning process. Second grant, so Grid Resilience Grant through the Department of Energy. This grant is massive and is going to really, really help transform our grid in the state. It's $33 million. We've been working with the Department of Energy on this one to make sure that we're getting that money into the state. It's a 5-year opportunity and really looking at ways in which we can harden the grid. Big caveat to this one that's a bit difficult. Well, I guess 2 caveats, honestly. There's a matching component to this, which we are working with either utilities or different entities on procuring that match amount. And then second kind of hardship and barrier is that we cannot do any new generation with this money. We were really hoping to be able to do microgrids and additional solar development and deployment. Unfortunately, we can't do any additional generation, but we can do quite a lot when it comes to hardening the grid itself and improving the resiliency of the grid. We've also been in conversations with Department of Energy on this fund to see if we can do virtual power plants as well, which they seem to be very interested in. And so we are potentially going to be able to do that. So we're waiting here for from DOE on our award on that one as well. But we're really excited to bring that opportunity to the state. We've also applied for the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. So this is $1.6 million, which focuses on specifically leveraging private funds as well, but that will go to help fund energy efficiency projects in a revolving loan style. We've worked with DOA on this one as well, and have met with a few community partners on this one. And we are really excited about this because it really does offer a lot of opportunities as far as what we can do with that 1.6 million and making it much more long-term sustainable. The two programs that you probably heard a lot about and we're very excited about, and it's a huge chunk of money, is the homes and HERA rebate programs. Unfortunately, Department of Energy has not released program guidance on these programs yet. They're two technically separate programs, right? So we will, as soon as those are out, we will be developing a bit more programmatic information about it. But basically, at the base level, homes rebates specifically is looking at energy efficiency rebates and helping to provide money to single family homes as well as multifamily homes and developments for energy efficiency projects. The rebate amount is actually dependent on the energy efficiency performance. So it benchmarks it at 20% and at 35%. And so depending on what performance energy efficiency you reach, you can access a specific amount of rebates. And then the HERA rebates are for home electrification. And so there is a set amount of specific projects for home electrification within those rebates. And homes are eligible for up to $14,000 in rebates to electrify their homes. So at the end of the day, we'll have $76.8 million for the homes rebate side and then $76.4 million for the HERA rebate side. We're really actively engaging with many partners, community-based organizations, and utilities on this one as well to try to make sure that we are using those funds in the most effective and efficient way possible, with the underlying goal of trying to make sure that it is getting into the communities that need it the most. So we want to make sure that as we talk about weatherization work, for example, that we're also working with contractors to make those families who are having their homes weatherized aware of these rebates, and then we're able to then use these rebates to help energy efficiency within their homes on top of the weatherization work. Next slide. So the first two here are also some additional grant opportunities that we've been actively chasing and applying for. So the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a very well-established program you all know, that is housed out of the Department of Housing technically. So that's an additional $47.5 million that the Department of Housing is going to be able to work with. We're really trying to focus on and making sure that we are combining and braiding the homes and HERA rebate programs with this program. And we'll be meeting with the Department of Housing on that a bit more. And as soon as we have more program guidance on it from Department of Energy, we'll have more solid figures and more solid procedures on that one set up. The EECBG, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grants, we've applied for that as well. So we'll be pulling down an additional $2 million from the federal government to support energy efficiency projects. The key component to that is 60% of that money that we receive has to go to local governments. And so working on a process for that. And I know that we have a lot of local government partners here on the call today. So if you have any insight on that or any kind of opinions, please do. Would love to hear from you. Would love to talk about that some more. So the last three that I'm going to talk about are opportunities that we're very excited about as an office, but we haven't necessarily applied for quite yet because they're generally newer or we are just awaiting additional guidance. So the Empowering Rural America grant, this is $9.7 billion in total funding for competitive grant opportunities. And this one is really aimed at co-ops and rural energy generation, specifically renewable energy generation in rural areas. And so we're meeting with co-ops actually today, as well as our power authority, to try to figure out how we can look at the best and most competitive application to submit for that $9.7 billion in total funding to generate renewable energy in rural Arizona. That is part of like this larger package with the Powering Affordable Clean Energy, or the PACE grant, which is an additional $1 billion in total funding for 60% forgiveness of loans on renewable energy projects. So Department of Energy and EPA is really looking at this as a comprehensive package on how we can make sure that we are empowering rural America to generate more renewable energy. And lastly, Solar for All. So this is housed under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and EPA. They have a total pot of $7 billion. And this is a competitive grant. It's not a block grant or formula grant. So EPA did mention, though, and they've dedicated that they will do one project per state at a minimum. They're looking to do about 60 different grant opportunities here. And it will depend, though, on the capacity for solar generation within the state. So Arizona stands a very good chance of receiving a good amount of money. And so we're looking at and talking with many partners on how we can make sure that we are turning in the most competitive grant possible. And so if you have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear from you on that one as well. Next slide. And so lastly, I just wanted to touch on how to get involved, because for us, we really, as a new office, are really trying to focus on engaging with the community as much as possible. And we want to make sure that we are serving you all and making sure that we are picking up off of your own expertise. We understand from our perspective that for many, many years, organizations like the Sustainable Cities Network have been doing incredible work in this space in the absence of state leadership. And so we want to be serving and really fulfilling on a lot of the projects and the aspirations and the expertise that you all have already established. We don't want to have to recreate a wheel, or we don't want to have to overstep on opportunities when we have the opportunity to collaborate and work together. So we really would like to, and we encourage and invite you to reach out to our office. I'll be providing my information to the chat, or if it gets sent out, that's also perfect. Because we would love to hear from you and we'd love to collaborate. So be as engaged as possible with our office, and we would love to collaborate with you all. And then lastly, just thank you so much again. And I would love to answer any questions that you might have.